Occasionally, I just sit around and think to myself, what fruit haven't I caked? A papaya! But of course I'm not just gonna cake one, I'm gonna cake two. I just made you choke on your food. Are you eating papaya by any chance?
No? Pears.
Pears. Oh, I haven't caked a pear. Jot that down. So I baked 10 pounds of my vanilla batter and I baked it in my egg-shaped pans. And I wanted to dye the batter the color of the inside of a papaya. But like I said, when I buy papayas here, they're much paler than they really are. Like when I eat a papaya in Grenada, it's so much more vibrant because it actually gets ripe. But I used a new food coloring and the color was amazing. So when the cake's actually baked, the cake itself was more orange than I wanted it to be. Like the color intensified so much more. Oops. The color intensified so much more. So when I accidentally hit my mic, I can see Cengiz like he gets like because I went like this and I hit my microphone. It was not intentional. I'm sorry. So yeah, the color was more intense, but it's okay. It's just I made a really ripe papaya, really, really ripe. So now I'm gonna start to carve my papayas. I started by carving, one half of the papaya, then I sandwiched it together and continued carving. And this is the kind of thing that I could just keep carving and carving and carving until there's nothing left. So my general rule is just to carve until I'm happy with the all over shape. We should do this for an April Fool's video. Like I'll be like, I'm gonna carve this into, I don't know, a mug. And then I just keep carving until I pick up one crumb. As you can see, it looks exactly like a mug.
And you just dip it in butter?
I just like, and I put a sprinkle on it. I'm done. Thankfully, I didn't carve my papaya into oblivion. It looks like a papaya, and now I'm gonna do the same thing with the second cake, but I want this second papaya to be a slightly different shape. It's not quite a papaya because I need to scoop out the cavity inside where the seeds will go. So for this, I'm gonna use a spoon and just carefully carve out cake. You don't wanna carve out too much. Obviously, just like a papaya, you want fruit to be left. And more importantly, if you carve out too much, the cake will be really unstable. Now it is time to simple syrup all 4 of my papaya halves of cake.
I never ate a papaya.
You've never had a papaya? You've never had a papaya? Right.
It's like when you eat it.
I don't know, I can't compare it to another fruit. Like it's more wet than like a pear. I don't know what else. Oh my gosh, yes, but I need to watch it again, making another note.
What's it taste like?
Well, it tastes like a pear.
I'm gonna decorate one of these papayas as a whole papaya, and the other cake I'm gonna leave as 2 halves. And this way it will look like a cut papaya. So for the papaya I'm gonna leave whole, I want to crumb coat the inside of the cavity, and for that I'm going to use some yellow buttercream. Even though I'm gonna decorate this as a whole papaya, I still want the inside to look like a papaya for later on when I cut it. Because do you notice that everyone is now cutting cakes that look like things? I didn't notice. So once I've iced the inside of this cavity, I'm also going to line it with a little bit of yellow fondant. So I'm gonna roll out my yellow fondant really, really thin, lay it into both halves of the papaya, smooth it really carefully with my fingertips, and trim away the excess. I don't want it on the surface, just filling the cavity. What other fruits have you never had?
I never had a dragon fruit either.
What? First of all, it's mandatory that you have had whatever I cake on this channel as part of your research. Now I need to create some uneven strands of yellow fondant. When you cut open a papaya, it's kind of like, not only is there seeds inside, but it's kind of like mushy. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm gonna press some of these straggly bits into the fondant inside the cavity near the edge. And now I can prepare the seeds. Well, I really don't have to prepare any seeds because what I'm using are chocolate crisp pearls, which are basically, it's just like a Rice Krispie, but in a perfect bowl, and then they're chocolate coated. But later on, you're gonna see that I did something else for the open papaya, and I was sad that I didn't do it now. I don't wanna ruin the suspense. I love it when I'm trying to recreate something and there's already a food that looks like it. It makes me so happy. Like when I did the sushi cakes, I found like candies that look like every part of the sushi I wanted to make, and that was amazing. But then when I do the burger cake, I'll go out into the world and I'm like, why is there no candy that looks like a sliced onion? Like I'll get so upset because then it means I have to make it out of gum paste. But they have candy that looks like fried eggs. Have you seen it?
I did, yeah, I love them.
Oh, sounds right. And then what I'm gonna do is just ice the top surface of one of the halves with a little bit of yellow buttercream. Now I have to take both these halves with the cavities filled and quickly sandwich them together and make sure that the cake is lined up. So I quickly just, it was quicker than a flip. Did you see that footage? Like I had to smash them together really quick, and now I need to crumb coat the entire thing in yellow buttercream. But I get when they make it in the shape of something to indicate the taste. Like gummies shaped like watermelon and they taste like watermelon, and gummies shaped like strawberries and they taste like strawberry. Why an egg?
Says the woman who's caking a papaya that tastes like cake.
That's totally different. It's entirely different. For the other two halves of cake, I am icing them as halves. So I'm putting the flat side down, each one on its own board, and I'm gonna crumb coat those two as well. Like my apron, crumb coat and chill. Now that my crumb coat is chilled, I'm going to ice these cakes. So I will ice the whole one. I'm gonna use my invention to help me really smooth the yellow buttercream. And then I'm also gonna ice the two halves using my invention to help as well. A lot of you have asked me for a kitchen tour, so this Friday, August 28th, I'm gonna be doing a live kitchen tour. This event is free to attend, and I'm gonna show you where I keep my tools, how I organize my kitchen. It's a behind the scenes look at the life of a cake decorator. And I might make a surprise announcement during the tour. I hope you'll tune in. Head to the link in the description below for details. I'm covering these cakes in a yellow fondant, but it's not a straight up yellow. It has like a bit of a greenish hue. I always try to think of what's the best base color to cover a cake in that I'm going to paint. Like what will really lend itself to be the canvas for my paint. Greenish yellow. I'm gonna drape it over my whole papaya and make sure to tuck it under as I'm smoothing. So what I find helpful is to just slowly cut away the excess and make sure there's enough excess to tuck under the papaya. We don't want to see cake peeking out from the bottom. Now I'm going to roll out more of my yellow-green fondant and cover the two halves of papaya. This is easier to cover because it's lower, there's no tucking, you just want to trim the excess flush with the base of the cake. And you always want to pay attention to where the nub goes. I know it's not called a nub, but this is what I call it a nub on every fruit.
Are we over putting googly eyes on fruits?
We must be, because as soon as you started to say it, I realized that. It is time to paint these papayas and make them look like papayas. I just try to look at the actual fruit and then I start to paint it thinking about what the base color is first and then the colors on top. I'm thinking of the stages of how the fruit ripens, and that's the order of how I'm painting it. So I think about layering those things. The base color, the ripening color, and then the little details. That's how I think about it. I love papaya Like it can't grow in Canada. Usually they pick it when it's not really ripe from the tree, and then they get here and they don't really ripen to full capacity. But when I go to Grenada and I eat papaya, I'm like, what is this? It can be really hard if you decide to add a lighter color on top of a dark color because it won't show. So what I'm gonna do is use the blade of my knife and sort of scrape away some paint in areas to give the yellow a chance to show. And if you make a mistake and cause a dent, use it to your advantage and later we'll paint that as a dent in the papaya. So here's one of my favorite parts, and I don't know why. I need to make the nub. I don't know why I like making nubs so much. They're so weird looking.
You do have somewhat of an obsession with nubs.
I do, I have a nub obsession. I've got a knack for nubs. I always make the nub from extra fondant or gum paste. Generally, they're really weird colors, so this is a great place to use sort of leftover fondant that you have. It's so bizarre because they're never perfectly shaped. And then I also like to use round piping tips to help cut it to the proper size, because sometimes as I'm stippling and texturing, it widens and becomes bigger than I need it, so I can use a piping tip to help trim it to size. Haven't you seen all the comments requesting nubs? I have. I've seen. I'm gonna go in and be like, I've created 2 nubs, and now because one of my cakes is in halves, I need to actually cut this nub in half before I add it to the 2 halves. So I'm cutting a nub in half. I've never done that before. Half nubs. And now I can just stick these nubs to the cake in their respective cavities. Just dab on a little piping gel to help hold them in place. And now I need to paint them to enhance them. So I'm using some taupe, some brown, some white, some of the colors of the papaya. Again, you just gotta look, because it depends on the stage of ripeness in the fruit, how the nub looks. Now on the other end of the papaya, there's a bit of like a little belly button, like just a little, you know what I'm saying? I want to use a ball tool to just enhance that, and then I'm going to paint a little brown paint into the belly button to help darken it and distinguish it. I'm going to paint a little brown paint into that belly button, or bum. I guess it's more like a bum, the papaya bum.
Maybe they grow like shish kebab, like they grow in two lines on 2 sides. Like
they don't grow like shish kebab. I've seen one, they don't. You think there's a fruit that grows like shish kebab? So the papaya I had, the real life one, had a lot of brown speckles, but the speckles weren't that brown. They were more taupe. I started to mix together some paints, brown, taupe, white. It was really hard for me to get the exact color I wanted. And then I started to speckle the cake by, dabbing my brush into that paint and then sort of flicking the bristles with my fingertip. Depending on how close or far you are to the cake, you'll get bigger or smaller speckles. Stopped here because I've got a whole papaya and 2 halves. Why do you really need to know what the cavity looks like? I guess you need to know what the cavity looks like. So I'm gonna flip one of these halves over and decorate the front side so that it looks like a papaya that was cut open. And what I'm gonna do is carefully ice the entire surface and in the cavity with clear piping gel. I just want a very thin layer. Now I'm gonna roll out some orange papaya colored fondant, nice and thin, and I'm gonna carefully lay it onto the whole surface of the papaya. I actually rolled it a little too thin because when I laid it on and smoothed it, I could see the texture of the cake, which bothered me. So I rolled out more extra thin orange fondant and I just put another layer on top. Now I'm gonna smooth that fondant and then carefully trim where it meets the outside of the papaya, because what we wanna see, what I'm making right now is actually the flesh of the fruit. I'm gonna go back to yellow fondant and roll out some more to cover the inside of the cavity, just like I did in the whole papaya. Remember? Way back at the beginning of this video. And you also want to carry that light yellow between the nub and the cavity. There's always like a line. It's like the esophagus of the papaya.
Isn't that the Egyptian?
No, that's a sarcophagus.
Uh,
It kind of looks veiny. I tried to add the vein texture with a veining tool, but I felt it was too subtle. So I'm gonna touch that up a bit later. I do wanna paint the flesh of this papaya. So what I'm gonna do right now is just paint that fleshy surface, and now I wanna fill the cavity with seeds. And this is what I should have done with the whole papaya. The seeds inside, you know, it's like, it looks wet. It's a fruit. So then I got the idea to toss my crisp pearls in a little bit of piping gel. And it really helped because what I loved is it made them stick together. So they weren't all just like running away from each other. If only they had time machines. Why don't they have time machines?
all these disasters in the world, doesn't mean you go back and fix your cake.
You're right, that was actually irrational of me. I shouldn't, you're right. Yeah, so to be clear, if there was a time machine, instead of going back to stop coronavirus, I would fix these papaya seeds because priorities, right? And I realized the best way to enhance the vein texture I created was to just use a little bit of white and yellow paint with a really fine brush and just go in and carefully add a little bit of veins. If you can't get enough cake, you know what to do.